minimize this stuff.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the beginner track workshop. Just as a heads up, we are going to be recording this meeting. Also, we will be holding a working session after this in the main room. So upstairs in the big ballroom from 3 to 4 p.m., we're going to have mentors and people coming around to tables to help out because we're going to move through this presentation a bit quickly. So we're just going to have some people helping out actually put the website together with any questions or debugging or anything that you need to figure out. So we'll have that as a resource after this presentation. And we also have some FAQ documents. If you go to gotechnica.org/beginner-track-resources, no spaces, all lowercase. And that will have some documents that should be helpful with working through the content. This is the same content as the October 9th Intro to Web Dev workshop. And without further ado, I will let Kyvan take it away.
Hey, what's up, guys? My name's Kyvan. I'm a software computer science major here at University of Maryland. I'm a tech organizer with Technica. How's everyone enjoying Technica so far? Good? Yeah. All right, cool. Yeah, like Elliot mentioned, I'm gonna kind of breeze through this workshop kind of quickly because originally it was intended for 1 hour and we only have 30 minutes right now. So after this, there will be that work session where you can work with me or the other organizers to kind of go through the code. And again, you can go to gotechnica.org/ what was the link again?
Beginner Track Resources.
Beginner Track Resources. And this will take you to the Google Drive. I want everyone to kind of like open the slides right now because there are some links on there that I want you guys to go through. But yeah, let's just get started. So what is website development? So website development is pretty self-explanatory. You know, it's the practice of creating and designing websites. When it comes to a website, there's usually like a front end to it. So that's kind of like what you think of when you think of a website, like all the text, the images, you know, the main content of the website. But websites also have like a back end, which is kind of where all the data is handled. So for example, like you're on a website like Amazon, you need to create a new account. Amazon needs to have like databases store like user information. And so that's like what the back end handles. And so the back end sends this information to the front end. Like whenever like someone logs into an account, you gotta like access that data. And that's usually done with an API, which I'll kind of go over later. So in this workshop, I'm gonna teach you guys how to make this simple weather app, which I'll preview it to you guys right now. So it looks like this. It's like kind of a simple weather app. It'll tell you the current like weather, like the temperature and also the status of the clouds. This is based on the user location. So this will work if you're like in California, it will tell you the temperature in California and such. So yeah, pretty cool, simple website that you guys will learn how to build after this workshop. And also the code to this website is in this link here. So if you click on this link, it'll take you to what's called a Github Repository. And this will have all the files that the website needs. When you click on a file, you can see its code. So this is just in case you might get lost. You can have the reference here. But I urge you guys to not like straight up copy from this and just paste it yourself. You wouldn't really learn anything that way. So make sure you like follow along with me to actually kind of understand all the code. So yeah, moving on. So first of all, we need a text editor to actually code with. You can really use whatever you have installed already. I recommend VS Code because it's really good. But if you don't have a text editor, you can click on this link. It's called Replit. This is basically an online text editor, which you can use to create your project. So if I were on Replit right now, you could just click on login and you can sign in with Google. And once you're signed in, you can create a project. So you can press create, and then you can select the HTML, CSS, JavaScript template. You can name the project whatever you want, like I would call it weather app. You press create, and this will automatically generate like the files you need for the website. So you get an index.html file, a script.js file, and a style.css file. And it'll also populate it with like basic templates for each file, which is pretty handy. So yeah, do that if you don't have a text editor installed, but if you do, you can go ahead and use that. So I'm just gonna give everyone like 30 seconds to kind of just get situated with your choice of either a text editor or using Replit. And by the way, if you guys have any questions, just raise your hand and I'll try to answer it as best I can. Okay, so I'm just gonna move on because we are kind of limited on time. So when it comes to creating a website,
Still step.
there's three main files associated with it. So there's the HTML file, the CSS file, and also the JavaScript file. So the HTML file is responsible for the actual content of the website. Again, it's like the text, the images, the heads on the website, like the meat. And HTML is what we call the markup language. The CSS file is a style sheet language.
No,
If
you
make
if you would like join the group, like more,
like edit the styling of your HTML
more,
elements, you can edit the colors, the positioning, and the sizing of your HTML elements. And so the CSS file is like responsible for making the website look good. And then finally, there's a JavaScript file. JavaScript is actually a programming language, and it handles like the kind of the background logic of the website. So like what happens if you press a button and such. And so for our website, we're going to use JavaScript to pull the weather data we need for it. So that's what we're going to be using JavaScript for. So before we begin, I kind of also want to briefly explain what APIs are because we're going to be using one. So APIs are, well, they stand for Application Programming Interface. And it basically just allows us to communicate with another software or machine to retrieve data that we need. So for our use case, since we're building a weather app, we need a way to somehow get the weather data that we need based on our location. And so that's exactly why we're going to be using an API so that we can access an external service to get that information that we need. And APIs are really, really powerful. You can kind of like get any sorts of data that you would imagine through them. And if you guys are considering, building a project for Technica, I would strongly recommend you guys to utilize an API or at any time you like need some sort of data. And a lot of APIs you can just kind of like search up on Google and you'll find one for free. So yeah, again, we're going to be using a weather-related API where we can access the weather data from external software. So yeah, after kind of briefly explain what everything is, now I'll just begin coding and hopefully you guys can follow along. Again, I'll go kind of quick. So don't worry if you kind of like miss some things, because again, we're going to have our work session after this, an hour long, where you can work closely with the organizers or me on anything that you don't understand. So first of all, I am going to open or create my three files first. So I'm on my desktop. By the way, if you're in Replit, the files were already created for you, but if you're just using a regular text editor, you have to create the files yourself.
I can also send you the recording. He already did this one, I think. And I have the recording, I think, of it.
Weather-app2, because I already have one called weather.app.
Oh, so I do not have this
I'm just going to create the three files we need, right? So we need the HTML file, the CSS file, and the JavaScript file. So the first one, we'll call index.html. And then, you can just create. Like,
yep, I already did this one. Okay, I'm going to see the other one.
So the second one, I'm going to call it. And then the last one, I will call it main.js.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly.
Okay. So now those are like the core files we need for the website. So now I'm going to open up my text editor. which in this case, I'll use VS Code. Expand this. And then I'm just going to open the folder in VS Code. Okay, so first we're gonna focus on the HTML file. Again, this is the content of your website, so this is where you put all the text and things like that. So in VS Code, there's a shortcut. If you do exclamation mark and then you press enter, you get that basic template that you saw in Replit. If you're not using VS Code, you can just like copy this code from my GitHub. But this is like the general template that every HTML file has. And as you can see in the HTML file, they're kind of comprised of what's called like tags. So like something like this. So usually there's an open tag and then a close tag. But some tags don't have that for some reason. But just know that these are called tags. And then there's usually two main tags in the HTML file. There's the head tag and also the body tag. So the head tag is where all like kind of the properties of the website go in. So that's what all these meta tags are. They kind of like, again, like describe properties of the website. Don't really need to worry about what those do. They're kind of like not important to like the actual content of your website. But this title tag defines like the tab name of your website. So like when you open a new tab and you go onto this website, the name of the tab will be whatever you put in here. So in this case, we want to change it to like something like weather app. So I'm going to change it to weather app. And then I'm going to save. And so to kind of preview what this website looks like, we can go into our folder. And then we can double click on the HTML file. And this will run our website locally. If you're on Replit, you can just press like the big run button on top, and it will also show you like a preview of your website. So if you double click on it next to HTML, you can see it's blank right now because we didn't add anything. But you see right here in the top right corner, there's a weather app tab, and that's how we define the name for it. So yeah. So one last thing we need in the head tag is that we want to include our CSS file in there, because we need a way for all the files to be linked up somehow. So in here we include a link tag, and then you need to specify the rel attribute where you define that this is a style sheet, and you want to define a source attribute where you actually put the name of the CSS file in here. So I called mine style.css. You really can call these files whatever you want, but this is like kind of standard convention. So that's how we link the CSS file to our HTML file. And so now we're done with the head tag. We can focus on the body tag. So again, the body tag is where all of like the content of the website goes in, right? Your headings, your images, all that good stuff. So first thing I want to do is that I want to include a big header saying like weather app. So I would use the h1 tag. As you can see here, it's like an open and close, and whatever is inside of it is like the text of the header. So I'm going to call it weather app. And just a brief note on h tags, they're header tags, so they're like the big bold text. The number denotes how big it is. The smaller the number, the greater the text. So if I put like h5, it would be a smaller text. But since this is the main title, I want it to be pretty big. So when I save, I refresh the website. Oops, wrong button. There we go. You can see a title appeared, which is pretty cool, right? We can finally see something on our website. So now what else do we need? So we need to include the image and also the text below it saying like how hot it is. So since they're kind of close together, I want to create what's called a div in HTML. A div is kind of like a container where you can put multiple elements inside of it, and they're all just like grouped together. You use divs like when you want to create sections for your website and such. So inside of this div, I want to have the image and the text, right? So to create the image, I want to use the image tag. And then one thing I forgot to do is download the image that I need. So I need everyone to go back to the GitHub that was linked to the slides. And then we want to download this image, weather-icon. and then you can just press this download button right here. You right click on it, save image as, and you want to put it in the same folder as your code. So weather-app2, hit save. So now we have the image in our folder. We can reference it in our HTML. So just like the link tag, I can define the source of the image. And then I'll just put the name of the image in here. I'll call it weather-p. And then the image tag doesn't have like a closing tag. It's just one open tag like that. So other than the image, we also need like that text below it, right? So in this case, since it's like small text, I don't want you to use a header tag. I don't want it to be bolded. I don't want it to be too big. So I would use a P tag, which stands for paragraph. So anytime you just want like generic text in your website, you would use the P tag. And then inside the P tag, right now I'm just gonna put some dummy like text in here. It would later be populated with the actual like weather and stuff. So right now I'm just gonna say it is like 50 degrees outside, just to see what the weather would look like. I mean, the website would look like after this. So after I do all of this, I'm gonna save. I'm gonna preview my website again. So going back to your locally hosted website, you can hit refresh again, and then boom, we got the image, and then we got text below it. So yeah, that's like all the content we really need, right? So now we want to make this look better. Right now it looks kind of messy. So I would want to like center everything, make the image a bit bigger, make that text a little bit closer to the sun. So to do all that, you have to use CSS. But before we do that, we want to label our elements inside of HTML so that we know how to reference them in the CSS file. So this is where we're going to use IDs and classes. So for my header tag, I'm going to add an ID of title. And then for my div tag, I'm going to give it a class because there's multiple elements inside of it. So the difference between IDs and classes is that multiple elements can have the same class, but only one class can be associated with one ID. So for my div tag, I'm going to call it weather-container. And you generally want to name it something that is close to its purpose. So, and then for my P tag, I will also need to label this because I want to eventually target it to update it with the actual weather. So I'm going to give it an ID of, I'll call it weather-display, like so. I might have named these IDs and classes a bit differently in my GitHub, but know that it doesn't really matter what you name them as long as they're unique. So yeah, we're done with that. So we save our file, and now we can go on to our CSS file. So in our CSS file, this is where we, again, style the elements. So the first thing I want to do is to center everything. So to center like the header, I want to target the header tag, in which case I gave it the ID of title, right? So this is where we would use our ID. We use the hashtag notation and then the ID name. So I call it hashtag title. And then you give it an open close bracket, and then inside of it, you define the attributes for that ID. So in this case, I want to use a text line attribute, and I want to set it to center, like so. And once you assign this and you refresh the page, okay, it is not centered. Okay, so I might have linked the CSS file incorrectly. Style.css file sheet. What is going on here? We do a hard refresh. Oh, okay, I'm gonna check my GitHub to make sure I put in the rel the link tag correctly. Where did my GitHub go? I don't know whose phone that is. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna just check that I did a link tag right. Okay, I'm gonna. Oh, okay. So it wasn't a source attribute. So right here, instead of source, it should be href. My bad on that. So once you save, I think it should be linked properly. Yeah, there we go. A lot of stuff blocking it, but as you can see, the title is now centered, right? Okay, so again, please change the source right here to href. That's the correct notation. So now we want to like center everything else, right? We want to center the image and also the text below it. So this is where we're going to use the div element. So we call the div by a class. So we want to reference that class here. When it comes to classes, you need to use a dot notation instead of a hashtag. And then I believe I call it weather-container. And then, oops, same thing here. I just put a text line center. So, and then, boom, both of the elements are centered now, right? Because they're all under the same div, so they get the div property. So now I want to make the image a little smaller, and also I want to make that text a little closer to the image. So to target a element inside of another like div, you want to first give the div class, and then you want to put like the tag of the element you want to target. So in this case, I want to target the image tag. So I would put img. And then to kind of set the size of it, you define the width. And then to make it smaller, I need something less than 100%. Someone define it to 25%, like so. And then for the text, to make it a little bit closer, I define the p tag. And then first I want to make it a bit bigger. So I define the font size attribute to be something above 100% to make it a little bit bigger. And then I want to use a margin attribute to make it closer to the image. So normally a positive margin will create space, but a negative margin will delete space, right? So I'm going to target the top margin of the element to delete space between the text and the image to make it a little bit closer to the image. So I'll set it to something like -3%. So once I refresh the website, it looks a lot better now. The image is a reasonable size and the text is properly aligned with the image. It's a little bit closer and it's a little bit bigger. So yeah, we're done with styling the website now. Now it looks decent. So now we're gonna actually code the background logic for the website using JavaScript. So again, what we want to do is that we want to retrieve the weather data. And to do that, we need to use the API, right? So we need to make an API call. So the first thing we need to do is to get the user's location, right? So in JavaScript, there is a navigator object, and you can access the geolocation property of it. And then you can call the get current position function. And whatever you pass inside of this is another function where the position of the user will be passed into that function. So we're going to create that function right now. I'm going to call it like get weather. And then I need to define an argument for this. So this is going to be what the passed in position is going to be stored in. So define this function. And then we need to make the API call. So I'm just going to grab the code from my GitHub because it's a very long line. And essentially, we're going to use the fetch function in JavaScript, like so. So fetch will call an API that you pass into it, and then inside of it, you pass a URL. So in this case, this is a specific URL for the weather API, and you want to pass in the coordinates to it so that it knows what weather data to get. So inside of here, I pass in the latitude and longitude properties from the position argument that gets passed in, and so that it knows like what weather data to get. And so what this will do is that it will return what's called a promise in JavaScript. Now this is kind of a complex topic that's kind of hard to explain like in this short amount of time. So just know that we're gonna get some data back in some amount of time. We don't know when. So we need to define something to process this data when we get it back. So that's why we use the .then keyword. And then inside of here, we need to find a function to process the data that gets packed. So in JavaScript, you can create like a quick function like this with the response being a parameter that gets passed in the function. And first, we want to return the response turned into a JSON so that we can actually manipulate the data that we get back so that we can derive the weather and the status of it. And then this will also return a promise. So what we need to do is use another .then function call. Inside of here, we need to pass in another function, right? So in this case, I'm going to call it data. And then inside of here, let's just log data to see what it looks like so we know what to get from it. So when we save, before we do that, I forgot that we need to link the JavaScript file, or HTML file. So in our body tag, in the last line, you want to call the script tag, and then link the JavaScript file, which is called main.js, and then do it like so. So now we linked it to our HTML file. One other thing we need to do is actually pass this function inside of here. So when we save, we should see the log of the data. So when we refresh, you can see that this file wants to know your location. Press allow. To look at the console, you right click and then press inspect, go to console. And here is what you get back. You can see there's like a lot of data that was returned from the API call. So what we need is the temperature, which is under main, and also the status of the weather, which is in this array. It's the first thing, and it's under description. So we need to store all those data in variables. So let me go back to my code. So what I want to do is I want to create a temp variable to store the temperature inside. So remember, the temperature was inside of the main property, and it was under temp. Sorry, in JavaScript, you don't need colons, I mean semicolons, so I'm going to delete these. And then we also need the description of the weather. I'm going to call this description. And this was under the weather property, which was an array. So I access the first thing in it, and I do dot, I forgot what it was called, so I'm going to go back to the log. It was called dot description. So put that here. Okay, so now we've got the data that we need. So all we need to do is combine this into one text and then repopulate the HTML element to the correct display. So to access HTML elements in JavaScript, you do documents.getElement by ID, which is pretty self-explanatory. You're getting an element by its ID. And in this case, we want to edit the p tag, and that's why we gave it an ID so we can target it. So we call it weather-display. So we put it in here. And this will return the element itself. It will have a lot of properties. The one property that we want to edit is the inner HTML, which will actually change the text of the website. So now we're just gonna like build a string that we want it to be. So I'm gonna do like it is blank, and add the variable name, degrees. It is blank degrees outside with, and then the description. Boom. So hopefully now, when we go back to our website, then we refresh, press allow, fingers crossed it updates correctly. Boom, there we go. It gives us the current weather and also the status. So I don't really like how it's giving me a decimal, so I'm gonna round it using the math.round function. So going back to our JavaScript, we want to just call math.round on it. And so now once we refresh the page, boom, it gives us a rounded number. So yeah, that's basically it with the coding of the website. There you go. I know I breezed over this really fast. So again, that's what the 1 hour kind of work period is after this to ask any questions that you have. So now going back to the slides. So one last thing I kind of want to talk about briefly is that how would you want to host this website? So if you want to make this public to other people to see, remember our preview is only locally on our computer. We want to use GitHub Pages. And so basically the process is that you want to open up a GitHub account. You want to create a repository like I did right here. So I'm just kind of like through it really quickly. You want to create a new repository, call it like weather-app v2, create repository. You just want to drop all the code into it. So that's like this whole folder right here. Boom. And then want to make a commit, I'll call it initial commit. So after creating a repository with all the code, you just want to go to settings, and then go to pages, and then under pages, you can specify the branch, set it to main branch, press save. And now your website should be hosted using GitHub. So the website URL should be just your GitHub username -github.io and then / the repository name. I already have one up and running, so JK. So it takes a while to load, but you just gotta wait a while for it to actually load up. So yeah, you could do some potential improvements with your website. Here are some resources that you can further learn more about, like different things I talked about. All these are linked in the document, so check that out. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Hopefully you guys learned something from this. Again, I know I went through this really fast, so there's that 1 hour work period, which is in the main room.
Yep.
And you can work with organizers and myself to truly understand the code and everything. So yeah.
So I'll be heading up to the main room. So if anyone wants to walk up with me, we have some tables there that we have, and we'll take the time to work through. Consider this just as a preview of what you can do for the next hour, basically, and we can get everyone having this up and running on their own computer.
Yeah. Thank you guys for coming.
Oh shit.
I think I went through that like super.
Yeah, no, but